Hello, it's Fred Dinage again. Thank you so much for joining me. And I want to talk a little bit more about the Kray twins, Reggie and Ronnie. Well, as we've already found out, they were jailed in 1969, in March of 1969, sentenced to life imprisonment on counts of murder, which the judge, Nelford Stevenson, said should not be less than 30 years. So let's talk about the prison years for the Kray twins. How hard were they? Well, I think they were particularly hard for Reggie Kray because he was sent to Parkhurst Prison on the Isle of Wight, at Newport on the Isle of Wight, then a very tough Category A prison with some real hard cases incarcerated inside the prison. Over the years, he shared that prison with the likes of the cop killer Harry Roberts, with the Moors murderer Ian Brady, and with various members of the Great Train Robbery Gang and many other particularly hard cases. So life inside was really tough for Reggie Kray. In fact, he was inside Category A prisons for most of his time, for most of that life sentence. Now, in order to protect himself, because in Parkhurst he was very much the star prisoner, and young punks who wanted to make a name for themselves, it would be ideal to take out Reggie Kray. So he constantly had a couple of bodyguards, other young prisoners, tough young prisoners, who looked after him in return for payment. The payment they received was the prison currency of tobacco and drugs. Now, Reggie Kray never touched drugs, but he was able to get hold of them because of the many visitors he had who would somehow, despite the stringent security at the jail, would somehow manage to smuggle the drugs and the cigarettes inside to him. He really devoted all his time in prison to keeping fit. He was in the gymnasium all the time. And whenever I met him, he was looking tough, he was looking fit, he was extremely well muscled. He really looked after himself. He did confess to me once, and this I don't think has ever been said before, but he did confess that once he did attempt to commit suicide. He was feeling particularly low, very paranoid. In his cell, he took the lens from a pair of spectacles, broke it in two, and slashed his wrist. His life was only saved by a warder who by chance came walking along the corridor, looked through the spy hole and saw him with blood spurting out of his arm, and saved Reggie Kray's life. That apart, he survived prison extremely well. He was moved to other prisons in due course, like Lewes Jail in Sussex and Gartree Prison in Leicestershire, and eventually finished up at the Category C Wayland Prison near Norwich in Norfolk. And that's where he really contracted the bowel cancer, which ended his life in the year 2000 in a hotel fairly close to the prison, obviously with top security around him at all times. So Reggie then coped extremely well with prison life. He never had any regrets about killing Jack the Hat McVitie, although he realised how stupid it was to have done that and ruined his life effectively. Ronnie, meanwhile, was sent to Durham Jail in the northeast of England. He was extremely unhappy there. As you know, Ronnie had severe mental health issues. He was very violent inside Durham Jail, desperate to be with his twin brother Reggie, and eventually he was moved to Parkhurst Prison because he said the straw that broke the camel's back, he said, was that his beloved Auntie Rose, his mum's sister, died, and he asked the governor at Durham Jail if he could send flowers to her funeral. Ronnie said permission was refused, and after that he just went to pieces and started to break up every prison cell that he was put in. He was eventually moved to Parkhurst Prison to be near to Reg, but again, with all his mental health issues, he couldn't settle at Parkhurst. I think also someone had said to him, if he managed to get a move to Broadmoor Hospital for the criminally insane in Berkshire, he would find life there was much, much easier for him. And because of his chronic paranoid schizophrenia, he was eventually moved to Broadmoor, and he was completely happy there, strangely enough. Again, he was surrounded by some pretty dangerous people, including Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, who every time, I've told you this before, every time I went in, had a couple of attractive young girls with him, different girls every month, stroking his arm and holding his hands, knowing they were quite safe in the company of this extremely dangerous man, because all around the room were the warders, or nurses as they were called, keeping an eye on things that were going on. Sutcliffe was never allowed to talk to Ronnie Kray, never allowed to look at Ronnie Kray, because the Kray twins had no time for anyone who had children or indeed women. So Sutcliffe knew the rules and never ever spoke to Ronnie Kray, never indeed looked across to him. Ronnie, in fact, spent his time, much of the time, in the gardens of Broadmoor, at the back of the building. Not a very nice place to be, because I've been there, and you'd be in the gardens there and you could hear the wailing and the screams and the crying of the seriously mentally ill patients at Broadmoor, very close to the gardens. So not a pleasant place to be. Ronnie also used to write his poetry as well. So he was fairly happy inside Broadmoor and survived there quite well. It wasn't luxurious. I mean, certainly for the first number of years he was there, he was in what can only be described as a cell. I've been in his bedroom, stone floor, iron bars at the window, an iron bed, communal toilet facilities and shower facilities. It was really, really basic, although later, as Broadmoor was developed, he was given his own room in the new building, and that, to be fair, was actually quite comfortable, and he even had drapes at the window, so very much a Ronnie Kray type of room. Both of the Kray twins married. Ronnie married twice, to Elaine and Kate. Neither marriage lasted for too long, and I suspect Ronnie really only got married because he'd been told he'd got more chance of freedom if he could show he had a nice, comfortable, secure family home to go to. He always said to me, I really want to go and live in Morocco. I want to have 3 houses side by side, Fred. I want to live in the middle. I want Reggie on one side, and I want you and your wife on the other. It never, of course, actually happened. Reggie also was married, quite happily, to Roberta, who went on to write a number of books all about criminals. So that was the Kray twins. As I said, Ronnie spent his time writing a lot of poetry. I'll quote you a poem he wrote about his mother who died. It was called To a Beautiful Mother. When I look at the silver in your hair, how I wish you never in the world had a care. How I wish, week after week, it was not always hello and goodbye. You have made the weeks, months and years fly by. You've been our rainbow in a dark sky. We hope that one day it'll be just hello and never again goodbye. The Kray twins loved their mother, and she was really quite a remarkable woman. So that was the prison years and how the Kray twins managed to somehow survive them. And next time I'll be talking about how I came to write that book and the various dramas along the way. Thanks for joining me. Join me next time if you can.